You know what hurts? It's when that 60Hz display you have just isn't quite enough. And if you're looking for a big screen tablet with a 120Hz refresh rate at a fairly budget price, then the Blackview Mega 1 may just be the tablet for you. This is the successor to the Tab 18, which I recently reviewed as well. And actually, I still use that tablet every day. It's my portable productivity device that I take with me basically everywhere. And the new Mega 1 here is almost the same in terms of specifications, except for one big difference and a couple of smaller ones. This new tablet has a 120Hz refresh rate on a gigantic 11.5-inch screen. Before we take a closer look at that though, let's do an unboxing. This is a fully stuffed box in typical Blackview fashion. You get a tempered glass screen protector included in the box, along with a leather effect folio case right off the bat. And this is awesome because you just don't need to spend any extra money on a case or screen protector. You also get a 33-watt charger, a USB-C cable, and a stylus pen. But don't get too excited about the pen, it's just one of those weird ones with a flat tip. I actually like these and I think they work fine in a pinch. Also, you get a SIM tool which I will actually keep out for now. Now let's take a look at the somewhat familiar spec sheet. First, the display. It's 11.5 inches with a 120Hz refresh rate and a 2000 by 1200 2.4K resolution, which has a 5:3 aspect ratio. It has the Helio G99 CPU, your choice of 8 or 12 GB of RAM. It has 256 GB of storage with SD card expansion, along with dual 4G SIM card support. Although you should bear in mind that you can have either 2 SIM cards or 1 SIM card and 1 SD card. You also get 5G Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5.1 on board, a quad speaker setup, a 50 megapixel Samsung ISOCELL JN1 primary camera, and a 13 megapixel front-facing selfie camera. The tablet comes preloaded with Blackview's Dokey OS, which is a fairly stock Android 13 based OS. And it does have Widevine L1 support, meaning you can stream Netflix in HD, as well as other DRM protected content. And finally, it has an 8800 mAh battery with 33-watt fast charging. With all that out of the way, let's take a look around the device itself. But first, oh yeah. So the Mega 1 sure is a big black rectangle from the front, but after taking off the folio case, from the back you'll see a very nice aluminium frame. I'm really glad they went with this metal frame like they did on the Tab 12 Pro, and it's actually something I really missed on the Tab 18. What's with these names anyway? Where's the consistency? At this point though, I tried to take off the information label on the back, but it was too hard. But then I was in too deep, so I struggled through a lot of drama and finally removed it. By the way, the color you see here is called Dreamy Purple, which has a subtle and very attractive look in my opinion. There is a rather large camera bump present in the top right, which sticks up a whole 3mm. Whether its performance is worth that extreme height remains to be seen. Along the top, from a landscape perspective that is, there's a dual function SD card slot and SIM tray, along with milled metal volume keys that look and feel great. Even the SIM tray itself has a metal frame, which is great. On the left there's 2 of 4 speakers and the USB-C port, and on the right you'll find the remaining speakers and a milled power button. Note that there's no fingerprint sensor here, by the way. Of course, the biggest draw of this tablet is going to be the screen, and it's a fraction smaller than the Tab 18, which had a 12-inch screen. This one is 11.5 inches. And actually that half inch does go quite a long way, because the Tab 18 still feels much bigger than this. Anyway, the big party trick here is the 120Hz refresh rate. It can be configured in the settings between auto mode, which will change automatically depending on what you're doing, permanent 60Hz, or permanent 120Hz mode. I've recommended that they add a permanent 90Hz, so I hope they do that in future. The screen is actually surprisingly gorgeous. It gets exceedingly bright with very vibrant colors, and basically perfect viewing angles. I hope this comes out on camera, but even at extreme angles the colors barely deform at all, which is just great. The resolution is 2000 by 1200, which looks very nice and sharp on this tablet. A big improvement over the Tab 18 in my opinion is the rounded corners. I actually really hate rounded corners in general, but at least they're smaller here on the Mega 1. That 120Hz refresh rate makes navigating this tablet silky smooth. In terms of usability, I see this as kind of a luxury feature, which makes tasks like browsing the web and the interface just generally more engaging and enjoyable. and I feel like the effect on this big screen is much more pronounced than it is on my smartphone that also runs at 120. I'm going to do a bigger comparison to the Tab 18 later on in the video, but I do want to say that this display overall seems a lot better than that one. So all in all, this is a beautiful display that looks great and is nice and silky smooth in the user interface and web browsing and stuff like that. But the main area where that high refresh rate screen becomes more interesting is gaming. But it's important to note that the Helio G99 inside this tablet is not actually an overwhelmingly powerful chip. It's perfectly good for general use, and also for some gaming and emulation too. But can it actually hit 120 frames a second? Now there are quite a lot of games on Android that support up to 120 frames, but finding them can be tough. There's no area in the Play Store or anything like that or any indication that a game supports it. So I resorted to searching online and downloaded a handful of games to try out. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not somebody that's overly sensitive to this refresh rate or frame rate difference. As long as it's at 60, I'm pretty much happy. And there were times when I felt like I was over 60, but I wasn't really sure. So to help me out, I used Taco Stats and Shizuku to actually get myself an FPS counter overlay. One of the games that definitely supports high frame rates is Minecraft. However, as I suspected, I was only getting between 70 and 90 frames a second in the overworld at default settings. Only by lowering the render distance was I able to reach somewhere close to 120 frames a second in sparse areas, although it was usually somewhere around 110 to 118. It does look really nice and smooth when you reach these high frame rates. In fact, it's a really engrossing and engaging experience. And to be perfectly honest, more than anything else, I've just been playing Minecraft on this tablet. Because it's just really, really nice. There's something really natural and flowy about these high frame rates. But there's no denying that whereas it does look very smooth, the low draw distance is kind of a shame. And even with that rendering distance set to a low value, the game will still drop to somewhere between 70 and 90 frames a second when you're looking at distant objects that have a lot of detail. And by the way, it is the rendering distance itself that makes all the difference here. Changing any of the other graphic settings makes a negligible difference to the frame rate. So I would say that Minecraft in general can't quite hit 120 frames a second constantly. But with all this in mind, I mean I am playing this game at solidly over 60 frames a second. And I think that you could easily get smooth gameplay by locking in the frames at 90 or 100 FPS. You might drop occasionally with this setup, but for the most part it's going to be very nice and smooth and it's going to look great on the screen. But the reality is that the Mega one cannot hit 120 frames a second in Minecraft. Another game that can run at a high frame rate is Subdivision Infinity. And this game hovered at around 117 FPS, but it did dip to around 80 very briefly if there are dense scenes with a lot of lighting. But overall, again, this seems really super smooth to me and was great to play. In Real Racing 3, I saw around 85 to 95 frames a second in a race. And that was whether there were other cars on the track or not. The free-to-play Ace Combat wannabe Ace Force only achieved around 75 frames a second-ish in-game. And Dead Trigger 2, which is really old at this point, still only reached around 90 FPS. In fact, the only game I found that did run fully at a solid 120 frames a second is this game called 1945 Air Force, and that's just a simple 2D game. But even then I can't deny that it looked and felt great to play with this beautiful smooth motion. The only game that really struggled on this tablet was Call of Duty Mobile, which was barely able to keep anything above around 60 frames a second. Now whatever you take away from this is going to be subjective. To me, just being over 60 FPS in any way is nice enough, to be honest. And all of the above games, other than maybe Call of Duty, are really amazingly smooth experiences. However, the reality here is that this tablet, along with its Helio G99 chip, actually just cannot really reach 120 frames a second gameplay in many games at all. For me personally, just having a big screen game running at 90 FPS or 100 FPS or whatever looks absolutely great to me. But if you're the kind of person who needs that perfect 120, then this tablet just might not quite scratch that itch. Anyway, I'm not going to go too far into emulation performance on this tablet because it is exactly the same as the Tab 18, so you can check out my review of the Tab 18 for a more detailed look at that. However, in brief, the Helio G99 here will not break a sweat with anything up to PSP, Dreamcast, and Saturn. And it will also play the large majority of GameCube games at upscaled resolutions, or at least native resolution, and will play some PS2 and PS Vita as well. This chip is absolutely no slouch when it comes to emulation. But of course you shouldn't expect 120 FPS in retro games because that's not how it works. I am happy to say that there is one utterly awesome use case for this tablet with its 120Hz screen, and that is Moonlight streaming at 100 frames a second from your PC. This works perfectly well and the Wi-Fi performance is excellent. Now my PC is mostly too weak for playing 120 FPS games, but I was able to stream a few titles successfully. Here's Sonic Superstars running at 120 frames a second over Moonlight, and looking crystal crisp and buttery smooth. I have to admit I had a huge smile on my face while I was playing the game like this. It's just an excellent experience. Then I remembered that it's Sonic Superstars and my smile turned into a perfectly horizontal and unemotional line. Because, it's alright. By the way, if like me, you don't have a 120Hz monitor, you can always buy one of these dummy HDMI plugs, which is what I did. It creates a dummy screen with your desired resolution and refresh rate, and all you have to do is to set Sunshine or Steam Link to stream from the dummy monitor. And so even if you have a 60Hz primary monitor, you'll be able to stream your games in 120 frames a second to the Mega 1 tablet. And I think this is just a really excellent use case for this tablet. I don't have a big fancy PC monitor, but I do have a tablet now with a gorgeous screen, vibrant colors, and a high refresh rate. And so I can really unlock some of the potential of my PC games through Moonlight streaming. It's really, really great. I really love using the tablet like this. Now one question I know I'll get is whether this tablet can play PUBG. And the good news is that yes it can. You can play the game with HD resource packs or the standard definition resource packs, and either way it will lock in at 40 frames a second. It will never go higher than 40, but it will also never drop lower than 40 either. So it's a pretty smooth gameplay experience overall. And you know what, I kinda hate how much I enjoy this game when I actually get into a game. But it is really fun once you get into it and you end up getting your first chicken Fortnite. Anyway, let's talk about some of the other features of the Mega 1. This tablet ships with Dokey OS, which is a mostly clean and very easy to use Android build. It's mostly stock but with some very special extra features. In the settings there's a toggle for performance mode, so make sure to flip that on if you want to max out the performance of this tablet. You also get PC mode, which gives you a more PC-like desktop interface. It works fairly well, but I think it's limited by the amount of apps that actually support running in a resizable window. Also, there's a built-in split screen mode which you can access from the settings. This is just an excellent feature on a big screen tablet like this. And you can even do stuff like playing a game on the bottom screen and having a web browser or YouTube open on the upper screen. This is a feature that I just use all the time. Why not play Myst on the bottom screen while you have a notepad app open on the top screen to take all your notes? It's a really great way to use this tablet. Actually, no it's not, I take all of that back. Go and get yourself a leather-bound paper notebook and a pen, and play Myst like a real man. Anyway, this time I wanted to take a closer look at Dokey OS's game mode. It's essentially a whitelist-based launcher that also allows you to block notifications and clear background processes. Tapping the little plus lets you whitelist apps including emulators or Moonlight or any app that you want. After launching a game, you'll find a little shade on the left-hand side, which brings up a little overlay menu. The Game Tools has a few options like disabling calls, notifications, and Wi-Fi, toggling palm rejection, and taking screenshots. And the Performance panel shows the current CPU and GPU usage, as well as your battery level, your play duration, and a way to switch into Power Saver, Normal, or Performance mode. And to be honest, this is a pretty bare bones but also very nice game mode. It just gives you a little bit of extra information and controls while you're playing a game. I especially like the CPU and GPU usage, but I wish I could see the current frame rate as well. The cameras on the Mega 1 are about what you would expect. Photos come out pretty soft and generally brighter than I would expect, but it doesn't look too bad and it would get by just fine in a pinch. Videos, however, are not so great with lots of noise and fuzziness. Still, there's nothing particularly terrible either way. I'm not completely sure that it justifies the 3mm camera bump, but at least there's a camera here if you need it. So that pretty much covers the Mega 1. But before I close off here, I want to compare the Mega 1 with the Tab 18, because these are two very similar devices that have a couple of very stark differences. First of all, the screen. Of course, on the Tab 18 you have your 12-inch screen, versus the 11.5-inch screen on the Mega 1. And like I said before, I do think that 0.5 inches makes quite a big difference, because the Tab 18 does feel a lot bigger. However, of course, with the Tab 18 you're stuck with that 60Hz refresh rate, versus the 120Hz on the Mega 1. If you really crave that silky smooth interface, then the Mega 1 is definitely going to be appealing. And now the quad speakers. Now both the Tab 18 and the Mega 1 have quad speakers, but the Tab 18 has them tuned by Harman Kardon, and I have to say they are significantly better on the Tab 18 than the Mega 1. Personally, I think the speakers in general on the Mega 1 are perfectly fine, and they sound great for just general use whether you're watching a movie or playing a game or listening to music. But they definitely lack a little bit of that punchiness and bass and just really clear, defined audio that the Tab 18 has. The CPU here is exactly the same between the two, and in my testing, the performance between these two tablets has been exactly the same as well. The Helio G99 is a really lovely chip that works perfectly for your daily tasks, streaming and web browsing and stuff like that, and also some really solid performance in terms of gaming and emulation. Of course, with the Tab 18, many of your games are going to max out that 60Hz refresh rate and be perfectly smooth. Whereas on the Mega 1, you're definitely going to be able to reach a lot higher frame rates, just not quite 120 in most games. When it comes to build quality, I think the Mega 1 takes the cake here. The aluminium body and solid feeling is just undeniable, and actually I really miss that on the Tab 18. I keep this thing in a case all the time, but whenever I take it out, that plastic back just kind of feels a little bit cheap, at least in comparison. However, I will say that my Mega 1 has picked up a couple of scratches. But that is totally my fault because the metal analog sticks on my Shadow Blade 2 just constantly scratch against the back. When it comes to the cameras, these two tablets are pretty much on par with each other. Neither of them produce particularly good videos or photos, but neither of them are particularly terrible in a pinch either. I do think it's nicer that the Tab 18's camera only extends 2mm above the shell rather than 3 on the Mega 1. And finally, I want to talk about Stylus support. Because they actually advertise the Mega 1 as supporting a stylus, but actually it doesn't at all. It ships with that rubbery thing that does work pretty much fine. But the Tab 18 actually supports an active stylus, the Blackview S Pen 2, which I have right here. With this you get true pressure sensitivity, tilt, palm rejection, and it is just awesome to use. The Mega 1 simply just doesn't have this, and frankly, they really shouldn't be advertising it like it supports a stylus. Every device under the sun supports that weird capacitive, rubbery thing that they include with this tablet. It's nothing special. Anyway, between these two, the big differentiating factor is of course that 120Hz refresh rate. If that's something that's important to you, you're probably going to prefer the Mega 1. For me personally, I just love the Tab 18. I love the keyboard case and the stylus pen, which I bought myself after reviewing it. I use this thing every day for note-taking, browsing the internet while I'm out and about, and plenty of media consumption and gaming as well. And perhaps a keyboard case will come out for the Mega 1, but you'll never have that awesome stylus support. Well anyway, that's the Mega 1 in a nutshell. Let's go over my likes and dislikes. Starting with my likes. I really like the performance of the Helio G99 chip. It's really good. And in general, this chip performs perfectly with your day-to-day tablet use, as well as having some excellent gaming and emulation performance too. The 120Hz display is undeniably beautiful. That smooth refresh rate really makes this tablet a pleasure to use. And for doing stuff like browsing the internet or swiping through the interface, it just looks beautiful. Also, the screen in general is just really amazing, with great viewing angles and very vibrant colors. The aluminium build is a welcome change from the Tab 18, and it makes the whole tablet feel premium and solid. The large battery and 33-watt charging means that this tablet basically always has battery life to spare, and you can charge it up very quickly when it runs out. The speakers are pretty good. They might not be the best out there, especially compared to other Blackview products, but they're still very good for daily use. The network performance, especially when it comes to streaming, is really great, and I had absolutely no problem streaming 120 frames a second games over the network to the tablet. I like that in usual Blackview fashion, you get everything you need for this tablet right in the box. A screen protector, a case, a charger, and even one of those crummy little stylus pens. But it's just really nice to not have to spend that extra money on random accessories. So what don't I like about the Mega 1? The first is that whereas the Helio G99 has really amazing performance and you absolutely shouldn't think it's not strong enough, the reality is it just can't quite hit 120 frames a second in nearly any game. I almost didn't put this on my dislikes list because I personally don't actually dislike it. I think it would be more accurate to call this one a consideration. that you yourself need to, well, consider. I don't like that the tablet lacks a 3.5mm headphone jack. I really think these tablets are big enough and thick enough to have them, and it really kinda irks me when they don't. I'm not going to say that the lack of stylus support is a negative for this tablet, because a lot of tablets don't support a stylus. The dislike here is that they're advertising this tablet like it does have stylus support when it obviously doesn't. And well, that's about it, because the Mega 1 is in general a really great tablet. It's really nice to see a 120Hz screen on such a budget tablet. And even though it can't quite hit 120 frames, that doesn't mean that the 120Hz is wasted. It's definitely a beautiful tablet to use with an amazing screen, amazing performance, a great build, and pretty decent speakers too. Really, it's the full package. For me personally, the Tab 18 still takes the winner's crown, but that's mostly because of the added productivity I get from the stylus and the keyboard case, and of course the slightly bigger screen. But the Mega 1 on its own is still just a fantastic tablet, and I highly recommend it. I want to say a huge thank you to Blackview for sending me this tablet to review. They of course never see my reviews before they go live, nor do they have any input on them. And I do just generally think they make pretty decent products overall. Anyway, if you want to learn a bit more about the performance of this tablet and the Tab 18, go ahead and check out my full extensive review of the Tab 18, of which there's a link below and on screen now. With this you'll get a full in-depth performance overview including emulation, gaming and all stuff like that. And that's this one done. Thank you very much for watching Retro Breeze, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.